There are so many moments in life when we sit around waiting to feel ready. We wait for the motivation, for the inspiration, for the perfect wave of energy to hit us so we can finally get moving. But here's the reality: that wave rarely comes. And if you live your life waiting to feel like it, you'll spend most of your days waiting, not doing. The truth is, the people who achieve the most aren't always the most motivated. They're not waking up every morning feeling fired up and excited. What separates them is that when they don't feel like it, they still do it. They've built the muscle of forcing themselves to act anyway. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, "I'll start tomorrow"? Tomorrow turns into next week turns into next month, and before you know it, the window has passed, not because you weren't capable, but because you kept negotiating with yourself. At some point, you have to cut the negotiation short. You have to say, "I don't care if I feel like it. I don't care if I'm tired. I don't care if it's uncomfortable. I'm doing it anyway. The first 5 minutes are always the hardest, but once you start, something magical happens. Momentum kicks in." One small action leads to another, and suddenly, what felt impossible 10 minutes ago becomes manageable, even energizing. This is why forcing yourself is so powerful. It's not about being harsh with yourself. It's about refusing to let your feelings dictate your future, because feelings come and go, but discipline stays. Here's the secret: you don't need to force yourself to do everything. You just need to force yourself to take the first step. Write the first sentence, make the first call, do the first rep. Once you're in motion, you'll often find that your feelings catch up. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. Every time you force yourself, you're teaching your brain a new identity. You're proving to yourself that you are someone who follows through. And the more times you prove it, the easier it gets. So stop waiting for the right mood, the right timing, or the right inspiration. Those things are luxuries. What you need is the decision that says, "I'm going to get it done, no matter what," because in the end, nobody remembers the days you didn't feel like it. What matters is that you showed up, you took action, and you created results. So the next time you catch yourself hesitating, remind yourself of this: motivation is a bonus, not a requirement. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to force yourself to start. And once you start, you'll be unstoppable. Progress compounds through consistency, not perfection, is a truth that quietly governs success in every field of life. At first glance, it looks like a simple statement, but beneath it lies the explanation for why some people move forward steadily while others stall despite having talent, passion, or even big goals. The human mind often believes that to succeed, everything must be flawless, every action has to be perfectly executed, and every decision has to be free of mistakes. Yet life has proven again and again that perfection is unattainable and unnecessary. What actually matters is showing up day after day, stacking small steps on top of one another, and letting the passage of time do its work. Consistency is what creates compounding growth, the kind that multiplies results beyond imagination, while perfectionism keeps people stuck at the starting line. When you think about compounding, money is often the first thing that comes to mind. You invest a small amount, and over time with interest, it grows bigger and bigger. The magic is not in the size of the initial investment, but in the fact that it was invested and left to grow. Progress in life works the same way. A small effort done daily begins to snowball into something far greater than the sum of its parts. 5 minutes of daily practice with a skill is not much in the moment, but over months and years it creates mastery. 10 pages read every night is not impressive, but over time it adds up to dozens of books and a transformed mind. Consistency builds a habit, and that habit removes friction, turning effort into identity. And when your identity shifts, progress becomes natural. Perfection, on the other hand, acts like a trap. It whispers to you that you should wait until the perfect time to start. It tells you that your work isn't ready to be shared yet, that you should hold back until you can deliver flawlessly. It convinces you to keep polishing instead of publishing, to keep rehearsing instead of performing, to keep planning instead of acting, and in this cycle, days turn into weeks, and weeks into years, with little to no progress made. Perfection becomes the enemy of action, and because progress is the reward of action, not intention, the person waiting for perfection ends up empty-handed. Consistency thrives on humility, the humility to do something small and imperfect, but to do it every single day. It thrives on discipline because showing up even when motivation is low creates a foundation that motivation can't provide. And it thrives on patience because compounded progress doesn't always look impressive in the short term. The first weeks of building a new habit often show almost no visible reward. The first attempts at a craft look clumsy and rough. The first workouts don't transform the body, but hidden beneath the surface, change is happening. Just like water boiling at 100 degrees doesn't show signs of transformation at 90 degrees, progress often comes invisibly until the breakthrough moment. Without consistency, you never get to that boiling point. With it, you eventually do, and what seemed impossible becomes natural. Imagine a writer who insists on producing perfect sentences before finishing a page. They will agonize for hours over a few lines, and often never complete the work. Contrast that with a writer who commits to writing just one imperfect page every day. At the end of a year, that writer has 365 pages, a full book. The perfectionist has only fragments, maybe nothing at all. The consistent writer can edit, polish, and refine later, but they have raw material to work with. This is the power of compounding. The imperfect daily effort multiplies into something extraordinary over time. And, ironically, it often ends up closer to perfection than the perfectionist ever achieved, because the sheer volume of practice refines the skill naturally. Consistency is also a mindset shift. Instead of focusing on grand outcomes, it values progress as progress, however small. If you run 1 mile today, that's progress. If you read 1 chapter, that's progress. If you practice your instrument for 10 minutes, that's progress. Progress does not demand perfection, it demands showing up. The magic is in accumulation. 10 minutes every day adds up to hours. Hours add up to mastery. Each repetition strengthens the neural pathways in the brain, making the activity easier and more natural. Consistency builds competence, competence builds confidence, and confidence fuels even greater consistency. This is the compounding effect at work. Perfection breaks this cycle because it paralyzes. It raises the bar so high that starting becomes intimidating. And when you don't start, you can't improve. The irony is that people chasing perfection are often motivated by a desire for excellence, but excellence comes from repetition, not from flawless beginnings. A musician who plays daily, even with mistakes, grows infinitely more than one who waits to play only when they feel they can do it flawlessly. A speaker who gives talks, even clumsy ones, improves far more than one who waits for the perfect speech. Action plus time equals mastery. Waiting for perfection equals stagnation. Progress compounding through consistency is also freeing. It removes the pressure to make each day life-changing or each effort groundbreaking. It allows you to focus only on showing up, because showing up is the win. The person who does 20 push-ups a day for a year ends up stronger than the one who goes to the gym once in a while and exhausts themselves with 2-hour sessions, but then disappears for months. The person who spends 10 minutes daily on a new language speaks it within a year, while the one who waits for a perfect study plan never begins. The compound effect doesn't need drama or extremes, it just needs loyalty to the process. Consistency also teaches resilience, because when you show up daily, you inevitably face days where you fail, where things don't go smoothly, where results feel invisible. But you learn that failure isn't fatal, that missing a step doesn't erase the journey, and that progress isn't about a single day but about the long horizon. Over time, this makes you less fragile. You stop fearing mistakes because you know that as long as you keep going, the mistakes become part of the growth. Perfectionism, however, makes people fragile. One mistake feels like disaster. One missed day feels like proof they're failing. And so they give up entirely, but consistency accepts imperfection as part of the process and pushes forward anyway. Another hidden gift of consistency is momentum. Once you build a streak, it becomes harder to break it. The mind begins to say, I've come this far, I don't want to lose it. This is why people who journal daily, or run daily, or work daily on their craft find it easier to keep going. The investment of effort compounds not only in results, but in identity. You no longer have to force yourself as much because it's who you are. And when something becomes part of your identity, progress becomes inevitable. Perfection, by contrast, kills momentum, because every time you fall short of the impossible standard you've set, you feel defeated. Instead of seeing failure as a step forward, you see it as proof you're not good enough, and that discouragement stops you from continuing. The cycle of stopping and starting wastes more time than simply being consistent at an imperfect level. Progress compounding through consistency is visible everywhere. Think of fitness, where the people who transform aren't the ones who train furiously for a month and then stop, but those who train moderately but steadily for years. Think of business, where fortunes are built not on one perfect decision, but on hundreds of consistent actions taken over time. Think of relationships, where trust is not created by one grand gesture, but by daily acts of showing up, listening, caring, and giving. In every area, it's the small consistent deposits that compound into something meaningful. What makes this principle universal is that it works regardless of talent or circumstances. Someone may be gifted, but if they are inconsistent, their potential is wasted. Someone else may not start out gifted, but if they are consistent, they will surpass the naturally talented over time. Time rewards consistency more than it rewards brilliance. That's why the tortoise beats the hare, why steady work outperforms bursts of perfection. The compounding effect is not biased. It gives its rewards to those who stay the course. Ultimately, the statement that progress compounds through consistency, not perfection, is an invitation to release the burden of flawless execution and embrace the power of daily effort. It means you don't have to be extraordinary today. You just have to show up. You just have to do something. Because when you look back after weeks, months, and years, those somethings accumulate into everything. And that accumulation is what changes your life. Would you like me to also compress this into a shorter 400-500-word version, something more like a YouTube script or article that keeps the same depth but is quick to consume? Small actions break the cycle of procrastination is a statement that cuts to the heart of how human behavior works and why people get stuck so often when they know what they need to do but cannot bring themselves to do it. Procrastination is not usually the result of laziness, though it often looks that way from the outside. It is the result of fear, resistance, overwhelm, perfectionism, or the mental weight of thinking about the size of a task instead of simply beginning it. The cycle of procrastination feeds itself. You avoid starting because the task feels too big. The delay makes you feel guilty. The guilt drains your energy, and with less energy, the task feels even bigger. The longer this continues, the heavier the burden becomes. What interrupts this cycle is not a sudden burst of motivation, not a wave of inspiration, but the decision to take a small action. A single, almost effortless step reduces the weight, shrinks the mental monster, and creates momentum that carries you forward. The human brain is wired in such a way that anticipation often feels worse than action. Thinking about a task magnifies its difficulty, while doing it almost always reveals that it is easier than expected. Procrastination thrives in the gap between thought and action. in the hesitation that allows the mind to invent reasons to delay. Small actions collapse that gap. They trick the brain into moving before resistance has a chance to grow. For example, telling yourself you must clean the whole house today feels overwhelming and you postpone it. But if you tell yourself you will only wash a few dishes, that feels light enough to start. Once started, momentum often carries you beyond the initial commitment. You wash a few dishes, then wipe the counter, then take out the trash, and suddenly the kitchen is clean. The action didn't require you to conquer procrastination in one blow. It simply required a small step that weakened its grip. This principle applies to every domain. A student who cannot begin writing an essay because the task feels daunting can lower the bar to simply writing one messy sentence. That small action gets the mind into motion and reduces the intimidation of the blank page. A person who avoids exercising because it feels like a massive effort can commit to just putting on their workout shoes or doing 2 minutes of movement. Often, once the shoes are on or the 2 minutes are done, they keep going. The secret is that small actions bypass the perfectionist standard and overwhelm that fuels procrastination. They remind you that progress is built by starting, not by finishing perfectly in one attempt. Psychologically, this works because of something called the Zeigarnik effect, which explains that our brains remember unfinished tasks more vividly than completed ones. When you start something, even at a small scale, your brain creates a tension to continue. This tension keeps the task alive in your awareness and makes you more likely to return to it. Starting, therefore, is far more powerful than planning. Small actions take advantage of this principle by opening the door just wide enough for progress to walk through. Procrastination also thrives on an illusion of scale. When you think about a large project, you see the mountain, not the step in front of you. The mountain feels impossible to climb in one go, and so you freeze. Small actions refocus your attention from the mountain to the step. You don't need to climb the peak today. You just need to take one step upward. That one step gives you a sense of achievement, however tiny, and that sense of achievement begins to rewrite your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who procrastinates and start seeing yourself as someone who takes action. Identity is shaped by repeated behavior, and even the smallest repeated behaviors change the story you tell yourself about who you are. The cycle of procrastination is also tied to fear of discomfort. Tasks often come with emotional weight, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of difficulty. Avoiding the task gives temporary relief, which rewards the procrastination. This is why procrastination is addictive. Each time you avoid the task, you get a short-term reward of comfort, even though it costs you long-term peace. Small actions break this addiction by making the discomfort manageable. You may not be ready to face the whole task, but you can face a tiny piece of it. That piece gives you a taste of accomplishment without overwhelming you. Over time, these tastes accumulate into confidence. Confidence shrinks fear, and fear is the fuel of procrastination. Consistency of small actions is what makes the breakthrough. Doing something small once helps, but doing it regularly rewires the brain. Each time you take a small action, you create a new neural pathway that associates starting with safety and progress. The more often you do this, the easier it becomes. Soon, you don't need to fight the battle of procrastination as fiercely because your brain has learned that action is normal, safe, and rewarding. What once felt like a massive barrier becomes a simple routine. In this way, small actions compound over time not just in results, but in shaping who you are. Another way to understand this is through momentum. An object at rest tends to stay at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay in motion. Procrastination is inertia in disguise. The hardest part is moving from rest to motion. Small actions are the push that sets you into motion. Once you are rolling, even slightly, momentum helps carry you forward. For example, a writer who cannot face finishing a whole chapter can commit to writing for just 5 minutes. Often, those 5 minutes extend naturally into 30. The hardest part was not the 30 minutes of writing, but the first 30 seconds of starting. Small actions lower the barrier to that start. Procrastination also shrinks when tasks are reframed as less threatening. A large goal looms like a shadow. Breaking it into small, actionable steps turns it into light. A person who wants to run a marathon but procrastinates training can simply commit to running for 2 minutes today. That doesn't feel threatening. Tomorrow, maybe 5 minutes, the day after, maybe 10. Over time, the fear attached to the large goal dissolves, and what was once intimidating becomes routine. Small actions reframe the task from impossible to possible, from overwhelming to approachable. There is also a psychological benefit in reducing guilt. Procrastination feeds on guilt, and guilt feeds on procrastination, creating a vicious cycle. When you take a small action, you experience relief. The guilt softens because you did something. That relief restores some energy and motivation, making it easier to do more. Over time, you replace the guilt cycle with a progress cycle. Each action, no matter how small, creates a sense of movement that makes the next action easier. In the bigger picture, small actions accumulate into meaningful progress. It is tempting to dismiss them as insignificant, but history, personal growth, and achievement all prove otherwise. A person who reads 1 page of a book a day reads 365 pages in a year, which is more than most people read. A person who writes 1 paragraph a day finishes a book eventually. A person who saves a small amount daily builds wealth over time. What matters is not the size of the action, but the fact that it is taken and repeated. Small actions build momentum, and momentum creates breakthroughs. The cycle of procrastination is strongest when you believe you need to wait for motivation. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes with mood, energy, and circumstances. Small actions prove that motivation is not required to begin. Action itself creates motivation. Once you start, the brain begins to release dopamine, a reward chemical that makes you feel good about progress. This chemical reward reinforces the behavior and makes you want to continue. The paradox is that people wait for motivation to act, but motivation is created by acting. Small actions unlock this paradox by showing you that you don't need to feel ready, you just need to begin. The statement that small actions break the cycle of procrastination is therefore not just advice, but a principle for how to live productively. It teaches that the cure for overwhelm is not to conquer the whole mountain, but to take 1 step. It teaches that perfection is not a requirement for progress, only presence. It teaches that action creates clarity, while hesitation breeds confusion. And most importantly, it teaches that the way out of the trap of procrastination is not dramatic change but steady, humble, repeated action.